You earned a raise this year. 5%. Maybe even 10%. You thought things were getting better. You thought you were finally getting ahead. And then you went to the grocery store. The same cart of food that cost you $100 last year now costs $130. Your rent went up. Your car insurance doubled. Your electricity bill is higher. Gas costs more. Everything costs more. And suddenly that 10% raise feels like a pay cut. Because it is a pay cut. This is not your imagination. This is not you being bad with money. This is inflation. And it is stealing your wealth in real time while the government tells you the economy is doing great. The official inflation rate might say 3%. But your actual lived experience says 15, 20, sometimes 30% on the things you buy every single day. Food, housing, energy, healthcare, education, the things you cannot avoid buying, the things you need to survive. Those prices are exploding. And your paycheck is not keeping up. Here is what nobody is telling you. Inflation is not a natural disaster. It is not an accident. It is not something that just happens like the weather. Inflation is a policy choice. It is a direct result of specific decisions made by specific people. The Federal Reserve, the government, the banks, they create inflation. And they benefit from it. While you get poorer, someone else gets richer. Every time a dollar loses value, that value does not disappear into thin air. It transfers from your pocket to someone else's. This is the greatest wealth transfer in human history. And it is happening right now. To you. This video is going to explain exactly how. Let us start with what inflation actually is. Because the way it gets explained in economics textbooks is designed to confuse you. They tell you inflation is when prices go up. That is technically true. But it is backwards. Inflation is not prices going up. Inflation is your money becoming worth less. There is a difference. And understanding that difference is crucial. Imagine you have 10 apples and $10. Each apple costs $1. Now imagine someone prints another $10 but the number of apples stays the same. You still have 10 apples. But now there are $20 chasing those 10 apples. What happens to the price? It doubles. Not because apples got more valuable. Because dollars got less valuable. That is inflation. When there is more money but not more stuff, each unit of money buys less stuff. Your dollar did not stay the same while prices increased. Your dollar decreased in value, which made prices appear to increase. This is why the government and economists always talk about inflation like it is this mysterious force nobody can control. Because if you understood that inflation is just too much money being created, you would ask the obvious question. Who is creating too much money? And the answer is, they are. The Federal Reserve. The central bank. The government. They have the legal authority to create money out of nothing. And they do it constantly. When the government spends more than it collects in taxes, where does the extra money come from? They create it. When banks make loans, where does that money come from? They create it. The money supply has been expanding for decades. More dollars. Same amount of goods. Your dollar is worth less every single year. Here is the part that should make you angry. Inflation is theft. It is not metaphorical theft. It is literal theft. You worked for your money. You exchanged hours of your life for that paycheck. You made sacrifices. You showed up. You did the work. And then someone with the legal authority to print money creates more money, which makes your money worth less, which means you can buy less with the money you work for. Your labor got devalued. Your time got stolen. And this happens to everyone who holds dollars. Everyone who gets paid in dollars. Everyone who has savings in dollars. Which is almost everyone. But here is the crucial part. Not everyone gets hurt by inflation equally. And some people actually benefit from it. If you have $100,000 in savings, and inflation is 10% per year, your savings lose $10,000 of purchasing power every single year. You are getting poorer. But what if instead of savings, you have debt? What if you owe $100,000? That debt just became 10% easier to pay back. Because the dollars you use to pay it back are worth less. Inflation hurts savers. Inflation helps borrowers. And who are the biggest borrowers in the economy? The government. Banks. Corporations. The wealthy. They owe trillions of dollars. Inflation makes their debt easier to pay. They benefit while you suffer. And there is more. When new money gets created, who gets it first? Not you. The government gets it first when they spend. Banks get it first when they make loans. Large corporations get it first when they borrow. By the time that new money reaches you, prices have already gone up. This is called the Cantillon Effect. The people closest to the money printer benefit. Everyone else pays the price. The government will tell you inflation is 3%. The official Consumer Price Index says inflation is under control. Do not believe it. The CPI is a lie. Not a mistake. A deliberate lie designed to hide the real rate of inflation. How do they do it? By changing how they calculate it. They use something called hedonic adjustments, substitution, geometric weighting. These are fancy terms for statistical manipulation. Here is an example. Let us say the price of steak goes up 20%. That should increase the inflation number. But the CPI assumes that when steak gets too expensive, you will buy chicken instead. So they do not count the full price increase of steak. They substitute. Never mind that you wanted steak. Never mind that your quality of life just decreased. The CPI says inflation is fine because you can eat something cheaper. This happens across hundreds of categories. If the price of something goes up, they adjust the calculation. They change the basket of goods. They say the product got better so the price increase does not count. They manipulate the data. Why do they lie? Because inflation numbers determine government policy. They determine social security increases. They determine how much the government owes on inflation-protected bonds. If they admitted real inflation was 10 or 15%, they would have to pay out billions more in Social Security. They would have to admit the economy is failing. So they lie. And the media repeats the lie. And most people believe it. Until they go to the grocery store and realize their 3% raise does not cover their 15% price increases. The official numbers and your lived experience do not match because the official numbers are designed to hide reality. Where does inflation come from? Money printing. But understanding money printing requires understanding how money actually gets created in the modern economy. Most people think money is created by the government printing physical cash. That is not how it works. Physical cash is a tiny fraction of the money supply. Most money is digital. And most money is created by banks through lending. Here is how it works. You deposit $1,000 in a bank. The bank is required to keep a small fraction of that as reserves. Let us say 10%. So they keep $100 and loan out $900 to someone else. That person now has $900. But you still have $1,000 in your account. The bank created $700 out of nothing. That borrower deposits their $900 in another bank. That bank keeps $90 and loans out $810. More money created. This process repeats through the entire banking system. Your original $1,000 deposit just became $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 depending on how many times it cycles through banks. This is called fractional reserve banking. And it is how most money in the economy gets created. But it gets worse. After the 2008 financial crisis, the Federal Reserve started something called quantitative easing. They bought trillions of dollars of bonds and mortgage-backed securities from banks. Where did they get the money to buy those assets? They created it. Out of nothing. With a computer entry. They added trillions of dollars to bank reserves overnight. This is what people mean when they say the Fed is printing money. They are not literally running printing presses. They are creating digital money through accounting entries. And those trillions of newly created dollars flow into the economy. More dollars chasing the same amount of goods. Prices go up. Your money is worth less. When the Fed prints trillions of dollars, who gets it first? Not you. Not small businesses. Not workers. The money goes to banks. To Wall Street. To large corporations. They get access to cheap credit. They borrow billions at near zero interest rates. They buy assets. Stocks. Real estate. Bonds. Those asset prices go up. The wealthy get wealthier. But by the time the money trickles down to regular workers through wages, prices have already increased. You are the last person to benefit from new money creation. And by then, it is not a benefit. It is just higher prices. This is why the stock market kept going up even when millions of people were losing their jobs. The Fed pumped trillions into the financial system. Banks and hedge funds used that money to buy stocks. Stock prices soared. If you owned stocks, you got richer. If you did not own stocks, you got nothing. Wealth inequality exploded. The gap between the rich and everyone else widened. This was not an accident. This was the intentional result of monetary policy. The Fed knew what would happen. They did it anyway. And it is not just the Federation. The government spends money it does not have. Where does that money come from? They borrow it. From who? From the Federation. The government issues bonds. The Fed buys those bonds with newly created money. The government spends that money. More money in circulation. Higher inflation. And who pays for it? You do. Through inflation. Through the devaluation of your savings. Through the declining purchasing power of your paycheck. The government got to spend money without raising your taxes directly. But you paid anyway. Through inflation. Inflation is a hidden tax. And it is the most regressive tax that exists. It hurts the poor and middle class far more than the wealthy. Let us talk about real numbers. Real prices. Real impact on your life. In 2020, the median home price in the United States was about $320,000. Today, over $400,000. That is a 25% increase in just a few years. Did houses get better? No. Did incomes go up 25%? No. The money supply expanded. More dollars chasing homes. Prices went up. Groceries. In 2020, a gallon of milk cost about $3. Today, $4.50. Eggs were $1.50 per dozen. Now they hit $6 in some places. Ground beef was $4 per pound. Now it is $7. Your grocery bill did not go up because food got scarce. It went up because your money is worth less. Rent. The median rent in 2020 was about $1,300 per month. Today, over $1,700. A 30% increase. Wages did not go up 30%. Your rent went up because landlords know there is more money in the economy. They raised prices. You pay. Cars. A new car in 2020 averaged about $40,000. Today, $48,000. Used cars went up even more. A 3-year-old used car that cost $25,000 in 2020 now costs $35,000. 40% increase. Why? Supply chains. Chip shortages. But also inflation. More money. Higher prices. Everything costs more. College tuition. Healthcare. Insurance. Childcare. All up double digits. But your paycheck? Maybe up 3, 4, 5% if you are lucky. You are falling behind. Every single year. And it is accelerating. This is not sustainable. Something has to break. Here is what the government and the Fed will never admit. They need inflation. They want inflation. Not the runaway hyperinflation that destroys everything. But steady, consistent inflation of 3, 4, 5% per year. Why? Because the government is the biggest debtor in the world. The United States owes $35 trillion. That is trillion with a T. They cannot pay it back. They never will. But if they can inflate the currency by 3% per year, that debt becomes 3% easier to handle. Over 30 years, inflation cuts the real value of that debt in half. They get to pay back their loans with money that is worth far less than the money they borrowed. Inflation is how they escape their debt without technically defaulting. This is also why they will never go back to sound money. Sound money is money that holds its value. Gold, Bitcoin, anything with a fixed supply. If money holds its value, the government cannot inflate away its debt. It actually has to pay what it owes. In real terms. They will never do that. So they keep the printing presses running. They keep creating money. They keep telling you inflation is low. They keep lying about the numbers. And they keep transferring wealth from you to them. The Fed says they are fighting inflation. They raise interest rates. They talk about bringing prices down. But look at their actions. The money supply is still expanding. Government spending is still increasing. They are not fighting inflation. They are managing it. Keeping it high enough to erode debt but low enough that people do not revolt. It is a delicate balance. And right now, they are losing control. Inflation is accelerating faster than they can manage. And when it spirals fast. So what happens next? One of three scenarios. Scenario 1. They get inflation under control. Prices stabilize. Your purchasing power stops declining. This is what they say will happen. It will not. Because getting inflation under control requires stopping money creation. It requires government spending cuts. It requires letting asset prices fall. It requires a recession. Pain. Unemployment. They will not do it. Not willingly. Politicians lose elections in recessions. Scenario 2. They keep doing what they are doing. Moderate inflation continues. 3, 4, 5% per year officially. 10, 15% in reality. You get slowly poorer every year. Wealth continues transferring to the top. The middle class shrinks. This can last a long time. Decades. Until eventually Scenario 3 happens. Scenario 3. The dam breaks. They lose control of inflation. It accelerates. 5% becomes 10. 10 becomes 20. People lose faith in the currency. They start spending money as fast as they get it because they know it will be worth less tomorrow. Velocity of money increases. Prices spiral. Hyperinflation. This is how currencies die. It has happened dozens of times throughout history. Weimar Germany. Zimbabwe. Venezuela. Argentina. It always starts the same way. Money printing. Inflation. Denial. And then collapse. Which scenario are we heading toward? Right now, we are in Scenario 2. Slow, steady wealth destruction. But we are closer to Scenario 3 than most people realize. Government debt is unsustainable. Spending is out of control. The Fed has lost credibility. Trust in institutions is collapsing. When people stop believing in the dollar, when they start rejecting it as a store of value, when they flee to real assets, the end comes fast. Are we there yet? No. Are we headed there? Yes. The question is not if. The question is when. And what you do between now and then determines whether you survive it.